So I stand with actress Gina Carano, and I do plan on canceling my Disney Plus, and here's why. So it does appear as though Lucasfilms, which is in connection with the Disney Corporation, has fired their actress Gina Carano, who played on the hit show The Mandalorian. I believe it looks like they fired her yesterday at some point on Wednesday regarding this post. Now, I took Gina's post for what it was when I saw it. It's now deleted, but you can still find it floating along the social media sites. But I took it as her warning us we need to re-examine the path we're currently on before it gets too late, like what happened in Germany. Because what happened in Nazi Germany did not happen overnight. It was a long, drawn-out process for Hitler to be able to do the things he did to the German Jews in the exterminate camps, or should I say the concentration camps exterminating the Jews. It was a process. It didn't just happen overnight. It got to the point where they were able to get the German citizens themselves to hate their Jewish neighbors. And then they were able to get away and justify later actions. And that's what she was warning us against. But Disney or Lucasfilms took that as a great offense, that very message. And are they in a position to even say and make that judgment call when they themselves did business with the Chinese government? I believe the name for the movie Mulan, yes, the majority of the film Mulan was shot in New Zealand, but there were still several key scenes shot in the Chinese province of Xinjiang. Xinjiang, for years, even during the time of filming, and to this day, has exterminate camps or concentration camps for Turkish citizens that still live there. Over 1 million Turkish ancestral Chinese citizens are in internment camps in the country of Xinjiang. And yet, and this has been confirmed, and there has also been confirmed genocide of those Turkish ancestral Chinese citizens in those exterminate camps by the United Nations and other nations that are participating in the UN. And yet, this did not stop Disney from not only bringing money to that country, that very same province, by filming there, but at the end of their movie credit scenes, they thanked the Xinjiang government for their cooperation. You are thanking a government that is committing genocide. Are you in any kind of position to then judge Gina Carano's post that was warning against things that lead to genocide? So that's one thought on Disney's hypocrisy on the matter. But what wound up happening after Gina Carano did that post that, again, I thought was a good post, a warning to turn back from the path we're currently on? Those who hated her took that as, oh my God, she's comparing the United States to Nazi Germany and concentration camps that led to millions of Jews being killed. This is not right. It's disrespectful to those Jewish survivors of the Holocaust. That's not what she's saying. She was not comparing this to the Holocaust. She was comparing the path we're on as being the same that was happening in Germany that led up to the Holocaust. But they don't care. They were looking for a reason to let her go. Lucasfilms were looking for a reason. Why? Was because over the summer, after the whole George Floyd kerfuffle, Black Lives Matter took over the country and most of the whole world in protest supporting the Marxist organization of Black Lives Matter. I've discussed them and the problems I have with the movement as a whole in other videos. Go ahead and check that out, or check those videos out. But because Gina was silent on the matter, she had waves of those on the far left coming after her on social media for not speaking out. That's it. She didn't take a side one way or another. She was silent, and they were coming after her for that and wanted her fired. So she did speak up against why she didn't want to take a side or position and how bad things were, but she did not want to take a side. They wanted her head. She then got into some trouble for just trying to make light of the whole pronoun issue. My preferred pronoun is beep, bop, boop. Was not trying to be disrespectful to those who are transgender, gay, bisexual, homosexual, what have you, lesbian community, the LGBTQ community at all. In fact, she even tried to clarify any misunderstanding, saying, I'm in support of any and all individuals. We need to try to counter any acts of hate and bigotry with a little fun, humor, and love. That's all. Again, they still wanted her fired for this. Lucasfilms couldn't pull the trigger then, but they had their reason now. I have no qualms of canceling my subscription to Disney Plus, though, because to be perfectly honest, one, I am in support of freedom of speech. I hate this cancel culture we're in. It does get dangerously close to fascism. But Lucasfilm's quality has basically sucked ever since it became in partner or in league with Disney, to be perfectly honest. I only got Disney Plus because as a Verizon customer, it was free for 12 months. And I'm like, okay, cool, because I wanted to see some of my childhood favorite cartoons like Gargoyles, Darkwing Duck, DuckTales. And I did that. It's over. So I was like, all right, Mandalorian was cool, so it was worth keeping on. I've already seen mostly all of the movies, so I don't need it anymore. And The Mandalorian is not that great. It's decent, but not out of this world spectacular, worthwhile for me to keep it on. The special effects kind of suck, to be perfectly honest. So I'm done. Also, as far as the Star Wars film, we can all agree the sequels to the original trilogy, The Last Jedi sucked. You had plenty of opportunities to kill off Carrie Fisher's character, Princess Leia, after Carrie Fisher, the actress herself, died, but instead you kept bringing her back to life. Somehow she has more powers than Anakin Skywalker in order to survive out in space. Somehow you were able to overcome the very same plot that led Anakin to turning to the dark side by which was bringing people back from the dead. That was his whole reason for turning to the dark side. It happened to his mother. He didn't want to see it happen to Padme, so he turned on the Jedi and joined Palpatine to learn immortality. That was the whole purpose. And yet somehow Rey and what was his name again? Ben were able to just resurrect each other. Of course, they tried to say this whole force dyad that allows them to do that. Crap. But I digress. That's why I'm going to cancel. And I think it's definitely unfair what's happening to her, what the mob is trying to do. Are we at that point? I have to agree. We are getting to the point where it's dangerously close to what led up to Nazi Germany and the rise, because it didn't happen overnight. It was a long, drawn-out process throughout the 1920s and early 1930s that allowed the German people to allow what was happening to their Jewish neighbors, and it wasn't happening by force. And what are we seeing in America right now? We have, actually not even just right now, over the last, I'd say maybe 18 years since I was in college, I remember seeing George Bush being compared to Nazi and Hitler. So we have been seeing lots of people on the left demonizing Republicans for almost 2 decades now as Nazis, as Hitler. And now all of a sudden, when the comparison is kind of flipped a little bit, not even to that extent, she was not calling anyone in particular Hitler or Nazi. She was trying to warn us before we get to that point. But you had many on the left already make that conclusion, and those very same individuals are now saying, how dare you compare this to what the Jews went through and the extermination that occurred. That's not what happened, but we see the hypocrisy. They were already comparing Republicans to Nazis since 2002 and the whole invasion war in Iraq. And then they did it again with Trump, which is why it doesn't really mean that much anymore, because they'll label it to anyone, despite the fact that they love Bush to some degree now. So it really doesn't really mean anything anymore, but I digress. When you start to use hyperbole like that to your political opponents and or fellow citizens and neighbors, it then justifies any act that can be done against them because you're trying to save your country. They're evil, they're immoral, and you are justified in any action taken to do that. And then we've seen over the many years, those who support Trump get violently attacked over the many years. We've seen them attacked in school on social media pages. Their hats just ripped off here in San Antonio. A young teen, 16 years old, minding his business at a Whataburger restaurant. And a guy comes up to him and throws soda in his face, rips his hat off right off of his head, taking some locks of hair out, verbally abusing this 16-year-old kid and assaulting him. We've seen the attacks, we've seen the assaults, all usually going one way, against GOP, Republicans against Trump supporters. We've seen a comparison of MAGA supporters to KKK and or, again, Nazis. So we are getting to the point where individuals are hating each other. And I hate to say it, but I really do think that we are at a point where we're living in two Americas, where the views are so diametrically different that there's very little unity being attempts to being made, because you have one side vilifying the other to such extent there's no attempts at unity. It's all attempts at submission. And the people on the other side who are Republican or libertarian at this point, because libertarians are somehow getting lumped into this, as well as anarchists are being lumped into one category that needs to be attacked and or violently opposed by those on the left. So I honestly think her post was spot on. It's a great meme. It's a good warning, because before we get to that point, we need to re-examine the path that we're heading, because history does repeat itself like an endless waltz. Or, if it doesn't always repeat itself, it definitely rhymes. And we need to be careful of the path we're heading, because we do have Democratic congressmen and women actually saying to this day, after Trump had lost the election, they needed to round up all of his supporters. Anyone who supported him, voted for him, they need to be added onto a list so that they can be blackballed. So you're already talking about compiling a list to identify any Trump supporters. And you have a lot of those very same individuals then also talking about, and these are congressmen and women, talking about re-education camps. They're literally talking about re-education camps, congressmen and women literally talking about re-education camps for those who support Trump. And so can you really blame them for an individual for making the connection between what's going on now in this country and what led up to Nazi Germany and the concentration camps and the extermination of the Jews? When you're talking about re-education camps, when you're talking about compiling databases for these individuals, and now they're talking about, and I did a video on it, feel free to go check it out, on them trying to now pass the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act of 2021 after it failed in 2020, using the Capitol attack as their excuse to being able to get it passed this time around. It's basically Patriot Act 2.0, and we've had former CIA head of the CIA, John Brennan, 4 weeks ago on MSNBC, I believe it was, talking about how we need to now start identifying and using this act to violate the Fourth Amendment rights of privacy, to now spy on all of these groups, and not just people who are extremists, but he also lumped libertarians in, and anyone who may disagree with the mainstream narrative that's being presented as potential terrorists. So they don't even care anymore of properly identifying who's going to be considered a terrorist and who is not a threat, but just someone with a different political ideology. They don't even care anymore. And then we had Nicole Wallace on MSNBC also talking about using drone strikes on American citizens, only instead of abroad, it would obviously be done here at home. They are using very hyperbolic and very dangerous language regarding their own citizens and what they're willing to do to combat anyone who disagrees with their narrative. So it's getting really dangerous, and I think that the warning needs to be made. We do need to back up, because Democrats and Republicans voters are really not enemies. There's a lot more in common than they think, but there is a big difference between the two, or at least the way a lot of them live. There's a big difference between the life of someone in Philly, New York, Jersey, Boston, and someone in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oregon, compared to someone in Suffolk Falls, was it South Dakota or North Dakota? The big difference between someone in Savannah, Georgia, Biloxi, Mississippi, Beaumont, Texas, Austin, etc. Different parts of the country are going to have different ways of life, different ways of looking at things, but there are a lot more in common that we have as individuals. We just need to focus on those things and not use these hyperbolic statements to divide one another. But we do need to come together, and I think that's what Gina Carano was trying to do. But again, the left was so fixated on canceling her at any moment. And so, what? I'll cancel you if need be, because the product, like I said, sucks anyways. Star Wars now sucks. It does. And that's not just my opinion, that's more or less a fact. So it's an easy decision to make. Buy Disney Plus. This my thoughts. Please don't forget to support this channel by subscribing to this channel, like this video, comment on the video. We definitely need to stand together in having an alternative voice that seems to not be allowed anymore. This is Bruce Ross Brooks, and I'm out. Peace.